All right, welcome everybody to Slam School. My name is Antero Garcia. I'm an assistant professor at Stanford University. I'm so excited the next few videos are going to be focused on everyday advocacy and really digging into a model, a framework for thinking about your profession and the work you do that Cathy Fleischer has developed. So Cathy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cathy Fleischer. I'm a professor at Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti, Michigan. I've been there this is my 28th year, and I'm a former high school teacher. Um, I've been doing a lot of work in advocacy over the past 10 years or so, starting with a book I wrote in which I looked at community organizers and interviewed them and tried to learn from them. And it's morphed over the years, and most recently it's turned into a website on Everyday Advocacy, which we'll show you later on in this broadcast, in which I've gotten to work over the last 4 years with a bunch of different teachers from all over the country, thinking about how they can do advocacy in their schools.
Awesome. Yeah, and we will jump into the website and some of the action plans and some personal invitations in a little bit. But I also want to introduce our other guest. We're honored to have Rick Joseph with us. Rick, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rick Joseph. I am a National Board Certified teacher and the Michigan Teacher of the Year 2016. And currently, I teach 5th and 6th grade language arts and social studies at Covington School, which is part of the Birmingham Public School System in suburban Detroit. Before working here, I was a bilingual ESL teacher, Spanish and English, in Chicago Public Schools.
Awesome. And so we're so happy to get to talk to you. I know your time is limited, so we're going to zoom through to get as much time with you as we can before we say goodbye. So I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, how has advocacy affected the work that you've done in your classroom and maybe the work you've done as a Teacher of the Year and the kinds of responsibilities that you've had?
Well, thanks to Cathy and her example, I've really realized the power of advocacy in my daily practice. And fundamentally, advocacy is about the establishment of healthy relationships. And it begins, of course, with the relationships with students and the students that I serve each day, and then in turn with their families. And of course, with my colleagues here at Covington. And then the relationships and the networks sort of extend out from this nucleus, if you will. So I've always sought to cultivate professional relationships with people that were like-minded folks. And that really kind of started with my experience going through National Board Certification, where I really developed an ethos of teacher leadership. And of course, traditionally in education, there's this expectation that if you want to be a leader, you have to leave the classroom and you have to go into administration, or perhaps you'll do union side leadership as a union delegate. But this new path of teacher leadership for teachers who want to stay in the classroom and serve their students, but also assume leadership roles, is one that's very much still emerging. And it does predicate itself on the establishment of good relationships. And so that means that I have to have a healthy relationship with my administrator here in my building. At the same time, I also have to have an awareness that teaching is a political act, and I am a political actor. So I have to maintain relationships with my legislators. I have to maintain relationships with the members of the State Board of Education. And I have to maintain relationships with members of the business community as well, because all of these agents are part of what makes public education tick. And of course, they all have a stake. And so I have to really seek to cultivate these relationships on a daily basis and be mindful of the times when I have to raise my voice. So that means there's points when I have to write an op-ed piece, or I have to speak on public radio, or I have to advocate for a particular position as a classroom teacher, as a National Board Certified teacher, or as the Michigan Teacher of the Year.
I love it. That's super helpful. So one question I have for you, as you're describing the many different things you do and the different hats that you kind of juggle as you're doing all of this, is if I'm a new teacher and I'm listening to the kinds of work you do, it might feel a little overwhelming. Do you have advice for how new teachers or teachers in their first few years might be able to get involved in some of the advocacy work you're describing?
It's funny, Antero, that you mentioned that, because I was just at a conference at Michigan State University on Saturday on a panel of State Teachers of the Year. There were 6 of us, and someone asked that exact same question. Essentially, what I told the people gathered there, these are pre-service teachers going into their final year of student teaching. Right. I said, again, that advocacy is based on the ability of a professional to form relationships. And so it starts with reaching out. It starts with extending beyond one's comfort zone. It starts with risk taking and being willing to do something new and do something different, to do something fresh. Sometimes that just means having a conversation with a colleague in the hall. Sometimes that means resisting the siloization of education and breaking out of the egg carton model that we always tend to find ourselves in.
Yeah.
So those courageous conversations are really important. Beginning a new initiative, trying something new for the first time, speaking up in a staff meeting. Those are all examples of advocacy on it that happen every day. And those are things that a new teacher can try. As I also have mentioned to people, choose your friends wisely. Choose your professional friends wisely. Find people that are, part of your tribe, people that feed your professional soul, the kinds of folks that really help you grow and maximize your learning potential as a professional. These are all ways that we advocate for ourselves as professionals, but also how we serve others in our advocacy.
I love that. And just a link that I want to connect to is this idea across all of these is that it's about not doing this by yourself. While it might feel difficult and courageous to speak up in a faculty meeting, it's about connecting to other people. And I love this idea of moving beyond the siloization of kind of where education is headed. So thank you for voicing that. Cathy, are there other linking pieces you want to connect to? I want to make sure we use Rick's time as effectively as we can here.
I was so delighted when Rick joined our summer advocacy work, in part because he was about to become, that was right when you were named Michigan Teacher of the Year and you were about to go on to do your work for the year. And one of the things, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but one of the things we talk about there is all the kinds of stuff that Rick has mentioned, but also finding that issue that matters the most to you and to figure out how to frame that and how to be able to speak to that. And Rick spent some really good time thinking about, well, what will be the issue that I want to raise and think about during my year in which I have people's attention in that role, and how to hone and frame that in a way that you could speak to other people. So I wondered, Rick, if you wanted to talk about that at all.
Without a doubt. And as Teacher of the Year, I had to articulate a platform or sort of some prioritized items that matter to me and as have always mattered to me. And so I mentioned three: equity, literacy, and job-embedded professional learning. And so at points in time throughout my year as Teacher of the Year, I had the opportunity to speak to these issues and work toward these issues. In Michigan, a couple of years ago, I was approached by a consultant from the Michigan Department of Education who works on adolescent sexual health. And she asked if I could approach the chairman of the State Board of Ed about issuing guidance regarding safe schools for students and staff who are LGBTQ. And I approached the chairperson of the board, and he was extremely receptive. She, as a member of the Department of Ed, was not allowed to have conversation with the board because it represents a conflict of interest. So I was able to serve as a liaison between the Department of Education and the Board of Ed, and they in turn were able to convene a working group, and we studied best practices for safe and healthy schools, emotionally healthy schools, and we were able to, over a long protracted period of time with a lot of political sort of feelings on either side of the issue, the state board was finally able to issue guidance and pass this guidance that was given to schools throughout the state of Michigan for how to create safe and effective schools for kids who are LGBTQ and try and create safe spaces, because there's a huge public health concern about student safety and wellness. So that's an example of an issue that meant a lot to me and continues to mean a lot to me. And as I was able to act on it and use my role to help promote positive change. And I feel like that was a noteworthy accomplishment.
I love it. And I appreciate that you're pointing viewers to ask big questions, right? Take up big topics, but also how they relate to you personally and individually, right? So issues like equity and literacy can feel very broad, but speak to the day-to-day activities that we do. So I think what we're going to do is Cathy and I are going to stay on and dig a little bit more deeply into some of the ideas that you've brought up, Rick, and we'll say goodbye to you now.
Okay.
But really, thank you so much for your time and for the work that you're doing. So appreciate your time.
All right. Thanks, Antero. Thanks, Cathy. Great being with you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
So Cathy, we're gonna continue moving forward as we think about this model. And so Rick kind of offered like this big perspective of lots of different tasks that he's doing. And I think it all comes out of a model that you've developed. I mentioned everyday advocacy, but there's some key components that are tied to this. So when we talk about everyday advocacy, what are we talking about? Maybe as you're sharing, I'm going to pull up the website as you're talking, if that's okay.
Okay, sure. So, Rick had this unusual platform to be able to do this work. And a lot of teachers don't have that. But some of the things he mentioned earlier are really at the essence of what we mean by everyday advocacy. And he talked a lot about the relationships you develop and the day-to-day kinds of things that you do. And I think that's pretty important. So when we think about everyday advocacy, what we're trying to support is how teachers can help change the negative public narrative that surrounds education. And we all know that. It's dismissive, it's demeaning, it's, all that we know, that teachers are feeling quite discouraged about what they read in the papers and what they hear people saying when they talk about the role of teachers and the role of education. And also sometimes quite misinformed, when I hear a lot of people talk about literacy, or like all of you, right? You get on a plane and somebody asks you what you do, the person sitting next to you, and you say, oh, I'm an English teacher.
Yep.
And they say, oh man, kids can't write today. Oh, their grammar's terrible. Whatever. Kind of misinformed things. So the idea of everyday advocacy is what we can do as regular everyday teachers to help change that public narrative, beginning in our own local context. And I think that's really important. How do we start locally to make some change? How do we do this and make it part of our day-to-day life as a teacher? How can it be part of what I've been calling the new professionalism of teachers, helping others understand why we do what we do, how to establish our expertise as someone who is knowledgeable about this.
Awesome.
And as we'll talk about in the subsequent sessions of the subsequent episodes of this, we think about how can we do this in ways that are smart, that are safe, that are savvy, and that are sustainable. And a lot of this is captured in this website that Antero has up, that I created in collaboration with Jenna Fornell from NCTE, with design assistants from Amber Jensen, who was a former high school teacher and a doctoral student in English at George Mason.
And just to be clear, so the URL, in case it's hard to see on folks' screens, is everydayadvocacy.org, always one word. And you mentioned kind of four principles, and they're under a new vision: smart, safe, savvy, sustainable. There's plenty of other resources here also. So I just want to make sure people are able to see that this is where all of the key ideas come from. And really, I think over the next 5 conversations that we have in the next one each week, we're going to dig into each of these individually, right? And we're going to have some other guests on, past attendees of an institute that we'll talk about in a second, to talk about what does it mean to be smart, what's it mean to be safe, savvy, and sustainable, and really look at what this looks like in practice, right? We're not going to talk about this theoretically or conceptually. We're going to talk about what this looks like on the ground, both from Cathy's experience doing this, from learning from this. I'm going to share some examples from my own teaching practice, as well as hearing from some amazing educators and members of the NCT community, like Rick, right? And so again, make sure you're taking a look at this website, because this is the first of many conversations here. I'm going to stop sharing for a second as we move forward. So that's kind of the plan, I think, for you and I, Cathy, right? Is to kind of look through this. Do you have a big goal for viewers of this by the time they get through, a month and a half of these riveting videos of the two of us talking with some of your friends?
I hope that people feel inspired by some of what we're talking about. Not just what you and I are talking about, but these amazing teachers who have taken on this work and made it a part of their everyday lives. I mean, these are teachers who started not exactly knowing what they were doing, and have become really, really smart advocates who are making changes in their local circumstances. So that's that's exciting for me. And I hope that it will inspire you to do that. Might also inspire you to want to dig a little bit deeper. While the website has a lot of materials, we also offer a 3-day summer institute. In which all of the teachers who you'll meet over the next few sessions have attended that institute at some point. It's really helped to hone their skills and help them to think about these in smarter ways.
And that institute's coming up as people are watching this. So what are the dates for that, and how do they find out more information?
Sure. The dates of it are July 10th through 12th, and it is on Eastern Michigan University's campus. But for the last 2 summers of it, we've had people come from across the country, and we have lovely dorm space available if people want to stay there. Some good dorms at a very reasonable rate. And what we do in the workshop, it's 3 pretty intense days. And so we start off by learning about advocacy and organizing through the work of a lot of established organizers and advocates. So we do a little bit of this is some things that I've learned from the Frameworks Institute, or this is some stuff I've learned from other places, and we bring that together. And then teachers begin to learn some specific strategies. What is it that we do? Like, how do we frame an issue? How do we gain allies? How do we work on strategy? How do we work on tactics? How do we do all that kind of stuff? And then teachers pick an issue that they care about. We always call it the issue that keeps us up at night. Like, what's the thing that, for Ricky talked about, the LGBTQ community, that things related to that were for him. But for other teachers, it's been things like, how do I make reading seem like a cool thing? How do I develop more community amongst the staff in a school I'm working in? Or how do I have my community understand project-based learning? Whatever, things like that. Teachers pick an issue, the practices we've learned about, they start to apply to that issue, and teachers come away with an action plan that they'll put into effect in their teaching next year.
I think so. People should go to everydayadvocacy.org. There's places there to sign up for the institute.
Exactly.
And I will say, if you
under opportunities on the website, on the far right side, there's a thing that says opportunities, and there's a drop-down menu there, and it's listed there.
Awesome. And I'm sorry for cutting you off there. Yeah, I think go to opportunities on everydayadvocacy.org. And if you can't make it to Eastern Michigan this summer, really, I think the next 5 videos are going to be an invitation for you to start doing this work. Maybe you watch this with some critical friends and engage in this work locally, right? This is an opportunity to start doing this. And Cathy and I will be participating on Twitter and engaging in conversation with all of you. We're going to be using the hashtag #SlamEDU. Again, SLAM is the Studies in Literacy and Multimedia. We are an assembly that is part of NCTE. And so hashtag #SlamEDU is going to be a place where each week we're going to offer one question. We're hoping you'll ask some questions around. And so just to get us started, we're hoping that at that hashtag you'll ask you'll think about, what issue do you wish the public better understood about teaching, right? What's that topic? It could be really big. It could be something really small. Cathy gave us some really useful examples to think about this. And really, what's the topic that's keeping you up at night that you'd like to work on either by yourself and in terms of getting started with these videos and you're going to think about allies, or with a couple of friends that you're thinking about you'd like to engage in this work over the course of the summer and develop some real developmental work around this for the next few weeks and leading up to next academic school year. And so I think that's our plan is next week we'll have a new episode as we start digging into these principles. And we'll have a new question for you, and we're gonna essentially have a long conversation with all of you over the summer. Or if you're watching this years in the future, welcome, and we hope you're still doing this. As Rick reminded us, this is political work, and it continues to be political work. And so these are the steps of how we do this in a way that is fulfilling and sustaining for all of us. Cathy, any final words before we say goodbye on this first of several episodes?
Yeah, one last thing. I mean, one thing that is possible is next year at NCT convention, people who have done this and are interested, it would be great to have a get together, meet face to face and talk more about this. If you're an English educator who's reading this or listening to this and you're a member of the Conference on English Education, we have a new commission on Everyday Advocacy there, and we'd love you to join that. So just reach out to one of the two of us. We can help with that.
Thank you for bringing that up. So yeah, definitely if you are a CEE member, or if you plan to be a CEE member, come join us and come to the annual conference next year or in November. So I guess this year, but next academic year. Oh boy, getting befuddled at the end of this conversation. But I think a lot of invitations, lots of places to participate, and we're really hoping, this is about organizing and a movement together. So we're looking forward to connecting with all of you. All right, Cathy, I will talk to you in a week.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.